think officials, law enforcement officials, the FBI, how they're handling the situation so far?
Well, I'm glad the president called it terrorism after a day or so delay. I'm glad we're not off looking for this to become characterized as workplace violence or something like that. Clearly, it's a terrorist operation.
Do you feel that he was too late in describing it as an act of terror?
Well, terrorism doesn't fit the narrative. We're supposed to have conquered terrorism, and so there's always this groping around, whether it's in Libya or wherever else, to try to say, well, maybe it was something else. It was a video. It was whatever, and they seem to have set that aside at least for now, and that's good.
I mean, you know, again, I don't want to speculate too much, but from what you have heard so far and seen, and from talking to people, does it seem to you that this is more domestic than it is foreign?
It's hard to say. In '96, the Atlanta Olympics were bombed by a right-wing fanatic who was also blowing up abortion clinics.
Yeah.
You never can be absolutely sure, but the thing that's really central here, I think, is the explicit attack essentially on American values and the celebration of Lexington and Concord, the beginning of the American Revolution. Boston stands out in American history for that reason. It was a symbol of the American Revolution. And just as 9/11, the terrorists, some Islamist terrorists, went after the World Trade Center as a symbol of American economic power and the Pentagon, and were trying to get the Congress. But Flight 93 happily was kept from doing that by very brave passengers. So when you see an attack on values, and that's what we had here. There's a very good chance it's, in these days and times, Islamist terrorists, or as Secretary of State Clinton called them in her last speech as Secretary of State, jihadis, which is, I think, probably the right terminology.
You know, since 9/11, I mean, we've put in place in state of alert. And in many cases, we've prevented what could be possible tragedies in New York and elsewhere. And it's actually a reminder for us, you know, this Boston Marathon, number one, that we're still vulnerable, but number two, that actually we have a pretty good track record since 9/11, don't you think?
We've done well, I think, the Bureau and the CIA and in overseas and in penetrating groups here at home. In New York, it's gone well mainly because of Ray Kelly. The New York police have done
We had Ray Kelly on yesterday, actually,
They've done a superb job at preventing terrorist attacks, and they deserve a lot of credit.
The CIA, how would they be involved here in this?
Well, mainly in penetrating overseas terrorist organizations and trying to ascertain whether or not there had been any communications, any messages, any training, any guidance. But in these days of a pressure cooker bomb like this being on the Al-Qaeda web magazine in English, it's been there for several years, and pretty simple and quick communications, texting, whatever, finding those kinds of links may be very, very difficult.
But is that could just be a coincidence, though, right?
It's very difficult to find out exactly how there might have been some central direction to this. The direction may be nothing more than the text message that says go.
Right. You know, the other part that is disturbing is that, you know, the pressure cooker bomb that was made is something that you can find on the Internet. Is there something that can be done on that front to make sure that information is not so freely available? Well,
pressure cookers are everywhere, and they've been used for improvised explosive devices in Afghanistan and Iraq for years. A number of American soldiers, Marines, and soldiers have been injured and killed by these types of bombs. Pressure cookers are easily adaptable to this kind of a relatively simple but potentially devastating bombing attack. There's not a lot one can do to prevent, limit access to pressure cookers.
In the meantime, though, Jim, we know what Ray Kelly is doing here in New York, but how much of a heightened state of alert should we be seeing, or should other cities be in, given this?
Other cities ought to learn from New York. I think New York, and we now know Boston and Washington, may be centerpieces of potential terrorist attacks because of the symbolic nature of these places. But every place needs to.
Well, but if people were going to roll the dice and say where was the next attack going to be, they would have said New York. I don't think Boston was really hugely on anybody's radar quite yet.
I think it was because of the April celebration of the beginning of the American Revolution. They didn't go just after any marathon. They didn't go after some place where they might have been able to kill more people and jammed into a smaller area, like a stadium or something. They went after a symbol of the American Revolution. I think that's important.